Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sree Ram. I will be hosting today's webinar about the top 5 QA concerns which QA teams face during a production cycle. For introduction's sake, my name is Sree Ram. I work at IXI Gaming as project manager. I've been working in the outsourced QA or games QA testing industry for about 9 years now, and I have worked upon games ranging from MMOs to your regular Xbox and PlayStation titles to mobile projects. And over this time frame, I have noticed that there are certain issues which kind of end up marring the performance of QA teams during the production cycle. They get preventive actions are taken, corrective actions are taken, and or mostly it's corrective actions which are taken. And once the issues are sorted, those issues kind of are swept under the rug and then never worked upon again. So today I would rather be discussing, or I would rather be showcasing some of or 5 of such issues and what can be done, or rather I'll be suggesting what can be done in order to prevent them from happening over projects. Kick it off with the agenda for today's session. Will essentially cover 5 topics where we will talk about issues with test planning, moving on issues with the resource quality or the quality of the resources allocated to the projects. We will also talk about issues that are faced with conducting network and multiplayer tests for projects, how automation plays its role, or what is automation's role in games QA currently, and what is QA's role in enhancing your product or your game's appeal to the customer base. Moving on, the first phase of our agenda today is test planning. To start with the QA project execution, it is very important to understand what goes on in a test planning process. In a test planning process, you basically document what are the objectives of the particular test, the objectives for the testing process of the project, the approach which would be taken, the scope of what needs to be tested, and the test focus for it. Second thing which comes into picture when you start upon test planning is what is test strategy, and what Google says about what is test strategy is when you run a Google search. What it says is a test strategy is an outline that describes the testing approach of the software development cycle. It is created to inform project managers, testers, and developers about key directives of the testing process, which includes the testing objective, chalking out the test environment, methods of testing new functions which are getting added or updated, and the resource and time estimates for the project and the milestone. When QA starts into a development cycle, it's basically 3 phases. One is the familiarization phase, where the QA team gets a build, they play the game, check out the components, check out the design. Then comes test planning, and then comes the execution. What I want to showcase over here is essentially when a QA build is delivered to, or a testing team kicks off, or an outsourced testing team kicks off a project, the team ends up spending about, let's say it's a 3-member team, the team ends up spending about 1 to 4 work days on familiarization, and another 1 to 7 days working and coming up with a test plan. And when I say a test plan, it includes the plan, milestone wins, test suites, test environments, and setup identification and test case creation. Now, most of the production houses or the development houses, they end up being charged on an hourly basis for each resource. As I said, for example, if it's a 3-member team, that means it's about 2 weeks of effort across 3 resources, and by headcount standards, that's about 6 weeks of effort without a single bug being reported. 6 weeks of hourly payments kind of come up to about $2,000 of work. So the estimate is just from the top of my head. Add the factors or that the documentation being used by the team is outdated and the tools being used, the time keeps piling on. And with that, costs as well. Depending on the phase of development at which the QA team is brought on board, the size of the project, and the updates, features, and the additional content release rate, a couple of concerns arise. First is the amount of time spent on familiarization of the product. Second is the amount of time spent in test planning. And third is essentially outdated documentation. As per my example, which I quoted earlier, we end up spending about 2 weeks of time without coming up with issues. Essentially, it's just prep work. And this 2 weeks of time can actually be cut down by implementing a very simple process, which is to bring a QA POC on board when the first functional build is ready. Not for testing purposes, but to understand what is the product's target, perspective, and design. How it helps is it cuts down on the familiarization time. The QA team will not need to be dependent on the production POC to clarify any queries when they start testing upon the build. They would have a POC on the floor who would be able to clarify any questions and queries, which essentially would cut down on the lag of communication between the development studio and the QA team. What it would also do is to help streamline the test execution process. The QA POC, right from the start, once he or she has got familiarized with the design and the target audience of the project, can start designing a test plan as soon as the development milestones are charted and the design components have been finalized upon. In addition, the QA POC can continue and keep the design documents up to date so that when the QA team comes in, there's no lag on that front as well. Because of the design documentation being up to date, all the QA team has to do is refer to it. If in case any questions arise, they go back to their QA POC and the issues get sorted at the same time. And last but not least, because it's the initial builds is where the actual design of the game comes into picture. Providing a third party or end user's perspective by the QA POC to the design elements results in good end user product experience. Moving on, resource quality. So right from the time when a studio comes up and says, okay, let's go build a game, the expectations from the product are that it would be downloaded by and played by thousands, if not millions of players. It needs to cater to different play styles from those myriad of thousands of players. And at the end of the day, it needs to withstand their whims and fancies because every player has a different play style. And hence the game needs to be compatible or at least react accordingly. Now, a generic software tester, as far as I have seen, works according to a script. It is text-based. It is mostly functionality verification of the software and verifying the compatibility of the product across multiple platforms. However, what is required from a game tester is ability to foresee the permutations and combinations that the game would undergo when a player is actually playing it, withstand the rigors of different playstyles, and of course compatibility across different platforms, which basically brings us to the point that is, what is the required skill set in a games testing game QA resource? Essentially, what makes a game QA resource stand out or be different from a software testing resource? The first is the ability to connect with design and lore. The second is the ability to proofread the lore's implementation in game. The third is the ability to foresee the possible permutations and combinations. The fourth is knowledge of software testing concepts. And the fifth is platform specific training so that a resource can actually, at the end of the day, run compliance and ensure that the software application not only adheres to the end user's experience, but also adheres to the rules and regulations set up by the platform manufacturer. Hence, in order to create resources or to provide our clients resources of such caliber, at ICSI Gaming, we have an in-house games testing training academy. It's called the IGTA, it's the Indian Game Testers Academy, which helps the player or which basically converts your regular run-of-the-mill player into a game tester by inculcating software testing qualities to their regular gameplay styles. Last but not the least, communication skills is another very important required skill set to game QA resources. If I have a resource who can only speak local languages, he or she may not be able to explicitly explain what the issue is. However, and that's why soft skills is one of the aspects that we cover in our training program. Moving on, automation in game QA. With the oncoming of smartphones and games on mobile devices and web platforms, there have been talks of QA processes to incorporate automation. In some cases, ideas of switching manual testing with automation. However, it's not as black and white as said. To look at automation solutions for a game, first the product needs to be looked at in depth. At the end of the day, we all have sworn by the Bartle taxonomy of player types. Developed in the late 90s, early 21st century, the original 4 types may have now broken down into multitude of subtypes. But one thing that it establishes for certain is that a gamer establishes contact with a game at a psychological level. Their play styles differ based on their psyche, subconscious, subliminal reactions of the brain. Now, can an automation tool cover all the situations created by the myriad of thinking patterns of millions of gamers? I think not. And hence, automation has more or less kind of been a new frontier when it comes to games testing. Although it has been around for more than a decade in the software testing industry, it is still, as I said, nascent in when it comes to games testing. The options are very restrictive when it based on the platform on which the game is developed and the tool which is compatible to that particular platform, and hence there are a lot of limitations when it comes to implementation of automation. But that said, it does not really negate the plus points on automation's front. At ICSI, we have, over the past 2 years, we have tried to attain a balance or strike a balance between automation and black box or manual testing. One of the first things that we did was incorporating automation into mobile and web platform games that we have been running over here. We have also successfully implemented the automation scripts in testing UI heavy content which has a lot of art assets coming into picture, or games which have a lot of art assets coming into picture. We have also implemented automation into performing load and stress tests for different projects, plus converting some of the smoke tests which were being executed manually over a period of time to automation scripts, which essentially takes a chunk of work off from the plate of the tester and allows the tester to focus more on on testing the or ad hoc testing the different functionality than the actual code gameplay. Moving on, the fifth point of concern which comes up with when it comes to games testing is network or is performing multiplayer or network testing. Now, with the onset of internet, everything became multiplayer. For single player games, it became social media promotions. For there were single player games with co-op gameplay. There were games which actually have multiplayer, massively multiplayer, and PvP content. So essentially, depending on the game, focusing on if it's single player or multiplayer, uh, the QA team has to test. And again, to test, there are multitudes of variables which need to be considered. Some of these variables are different bandwidths, real-time traffic, bandwidth fluctuations, and the load capacity of the servers. With internet, different countries, different ISPs, different available speeds all play a major role at affecting player experience. Hence, it's imperative that a game, depending upon the platform it is on, responds accordingly. If the game is trying to connect two servers through an ultra-slow ISP or a decent ISP, but server traffic is immense, it is at the end of the day going to affect the experience and the reviews of the product. Point in case, the recent server traffic issues with the Players Unknown Battlegrounds. Moving on. So when you kind of strain it out, the requirements for performing for a QA team to start testing multiplayer or network, to start performing multiplayer or network testing is essentially bandwidth, monitoring traffic, and a variety of networks. However, what restricts the QA testing effort is how a network throttle or a choke works. A choke, once allocated on or applied to the bandwidth, provides a steady stream. It does not replicate the fluctuations that a player would get when they move from tower to tower or when their Wi-Fi fluctuates, so as I said, this becomes difficult to replicate in testing conditions, and hence it is imperative to test the functions to help the production team identify and understand the point at which the balance needs to be struck. Moving on, what can a QA team do when it comes to increasing the appeal of your game to the customer base? Well, everybody wants their games to be popular, and we're not just talking download counts, we are talking player retention. A lot of money, time, and effort is spent in establishing processes, designing and implementation of corresponding mechanisms and UI elements. Bright color palette and social media invites are fine, but player retention is not just based on that. It is heavily reliant on a mix of design, simplicity, function, and appeal. And hence, a major role is played by a certain bug type called design feedback or suggestions. In numerous databases, it is also assigned the priorities along the lines of D, the severity along the lines of D suggestions or P4 feedback. At the end of the day, your QA resources mind is the eclectic mix of gamer and software tester. Over time, they start understanding the nuances of the small design elements. This further helps in establishing a communication channel for design feedback between the design and production and the QA team. So a black box testing team is not just to verify that the product is error-free. The other main functions of it is to verify that the game will withstand, satisfy the end user's expectations. Hence, what makes a game tester is part gamer, part software tester, part speaker, and part critic. The QA tester is just a tester. He or she is a gamer as well. And when we are allocated to a project, the connection to the product's success is the same as what the studio or the development team would share. So give your QA team the space to be vocal with feedback and suggestions. With that, we come to an end. Uh, we come to the end of the seminar. A QA team is imperative to the product's design and success, yet at XE, we incorporate the above pointers whenever we kickstart a project, which in turn has helped with first pass at submissions and multiple successful products in the market. And we'll be open for questions now. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. The first one being, how do you manage the cost of the resource if you get one resource right from the first build? Because this would obviously add up to additional cost. So at the end of the day, it comes to the rapport which the development studio and the outsourced QA teams or the outsourced QA studio share. You can talk to them and see if they can get one of the project managers on board to work and perform the said functions on a reduced rate or probably for free, because essentially at the end of the day it's going to be a long time running engagement, and work it from there. Okay, question number 2, how do you make sure that a person coming out of IGTA is of higher quality than what you get from lateral? Well, we have certain protocols in place when we essentially pick up people for our in-house training program. One of them is a mandatory requirement of the person having played at least 4 different genres of games. If the person, when a person walks in and shows interest or interest in joining the IGA program, they are screened and we talk to them about what kind of games they have played. We discuss with them how deeply or do they know the mechanisms of the game. And based on that, we take a call, inculcate them into the IGTA program, work out, run them through our game testing module, help them understand the different genres, help them understand what goes into the different genres. We also help them. We make them play different genres of games. And in the next phase, we train them on software testing concepts. Once they are done with that, we make them do play tests or focus group tests on titles which are already into the market. Once and through all these phases, there are multiple tests which are performed to see how they are faring through the entire process of training. Once we see that a resource is actually catching up pretty quickly, we start training them on platform-specific compliance. For iOS, Apple guidelines. For Xbox, it would be your TCRs. For PlayStation, it would be your TRCs. For Nintendo, lot checks. We start training them. It's a 3-month period over which they pretty much get trained across everything on almost every platform. Then we conduct another post-training test where, and only after clearing the post-training test are they allocated to a project on the floor. I hope that answers your query. Any other questions? Please feel free to shoot. We'll be around for another 5 minutes. Okay, I have another question comparing software testers to games testers and what makes it different, right? So, in my experience, a software tester, due to the restricted options a software provides to play around with, is unable to foresee what permutation and combinations would exist over there. The purpose of a software is simple: to help the user perform a set function. If it's an e-commerce app, it will help the user to scroll through the available options and place an order. If it's a creation software, it helps the user to create content. However, the same does not apply to a game. A game has to withstand the different play styles from thousands of players out there, withstand the compatibility with different platforms the players or end users will play it on, and withstand the multitasking fancies of the users as well. And hence, the QA team requires a very specific lot of resources. One who understands what a game goes through in the hand of a user on a day-to-day basis, and understands the concepts of software testing, and understand the software submission guidelines laid out by the release platform manufacturer. I hope that answers your question too. Thanks. We have another question here. Is it a good idea to have fresh eyes in beta stages? Yes, it is a very good idea to have fresh eyes in beta stages. Is why a lot of studios run open and beta closed. It's a very old, time-tested practice which has been performed or is performed by almost every single game development studio across the world. They bring on board family and friends, showcase what the final build, how does it look, and get reviews or previews of the look and feel, the appeal of the game. So it's been brought to my notice that a few of the attendees are unable to send questions in the chat window due to browser compatibility issues. Please do not worry. You can mail me your questions, and I will at sreeram.nair. It's SREERAM.NAIR at indiumsoft. That's INDIUMSOFT.com, and I will respond to them promptly. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoy and have a great evening or day based upon wherever you are from. Thanks. Or in the words of Hitchhiker, so long and thanks for all the fish.